The book of Hebrews is one of the most sustained and carefully argued letter in the entire New Testament, and its single purpose, its whole reason for existing, is to answer one question. Is Jesus worth holding on to when holding on is hard? Let's get into it. Before we can understand what Hebrews says, we have to understand who it was written to, because this letter does not exist in a vacuum. It was written to specific people, in a specific situation, under specific pressure. And when you know what that pressure was, every single argument the author makes becomes personal. It stops being theology. It starts being a lifeline. Nobody knows for certain who wrote the book of Hebrews. The author never names themselves. Paul has been suggested, Barnabas, Apollos, Priscilla. The honest answer is, we don't know. What we do know is that whoever wrote it was one of the most gifted writers in the entire New Testament, and they knew the Hebrew Scriptures in extraordinary depth. What we also know, with confidence, is who they were writing to: Jewish Christians, people who had grown up inside Judaism, who had known the Torah since childhood, who had been formed by the temple, the priesthood, the sacrifices, the festivals. All of it was their world, their identity, their entire framework for understanding God and how to reach Him. And then they had encountered Jesus, and they had believed, and they had joined this new community, the church, which in its early decades was largely Jewish believers who understood Jesus not as a departure from their heritage, but as the fulfillment of it. And now, they were under pressure. The letter appears to have been written somewhere around the 60s AD, a time of increasing Roman hostility toward Christians, a time when following Jesus was beginning to cost things, real things, jobs, relationships, social standing, safety. Look at what the author writes in chapter 10, verses 32 through 34. He is reminding them of their own history. Remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you endured in a great conflict full of suffering. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution. At other times, you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You suffered along with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property. Their property was confiscated. They were publicly insulted. They watched friends go to prison. And in those early days, they endured it joyfully, because the faith was alive, the conviction was strong, the hope was fresh and immediate. But that was earlier days. Now, in the present of this letter, the faith is not as fresh, the hope is not as close, and the cost has not gone down. If anything, it is going up. And some of these people are quietly, privately considering the exit. And the exit available to them is not abandoning religion altogether. The exit is going back to Judaism, back to the temple and the priesthood and the sacrificial system, which was legal under Roman law in a way Christianity was not, which would relieve the social pressure, which would make life easier. You can understand the logic. I started this because of Jesus, but the old way is still there. The temple is still there. Maybe I can ease back. Maybe I can hold on to the spirit of what Jesus was, without the cost of being openly identified with Him. And the author of Hebrews sits down and writes a letter, not a scolding letter, not a shaming letter, a letter that builds the most thorough, most careful, most compassionate case possible for one single conclusion. Jesus is better, not just good, not just one option among many, better. Better than everything that came before, better than the angels, better than Moses, better than the entire Levitical priesthood, better than the sacrifices, better than the temple itself. And if Jesus is better, then going back is not neutral. Going back is walking away from the real thing and back into the shadow of it. And these people, the author is convinced, deserve to understand exactly what they have before they let it go. The author doesn't waste a single word. The letter opens, in its very first sentence, with one of the most majestic statements in the New Testament. Hebrews 1:1-2. In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times and in various ways. But in these last days, He has spoken to us by His Son, whom He appointed heir of all things, and through whom also He made the universe. In the past, prophets. In these last days, His Son. The author is not dismissing the prophets, he is placing them in sequence. There was a word through Moses, a word through Isaiah, a word through Ezekiel, all of them true, all of them important, all of them part of the same story. But now, the Son has spoken. And when the Son speaks, it is not one more voice in a long line. It is the voice the whole line was building toward. The clearest, fullest, most complete communication of who God is that has ever been given. And then the author spends the first 2 chapters arguing that Jesus is greater than the angels. Now, why would he need to argue that? Why is the comparison even necessary? Because in first century Judaism, angels were understood to be the intermediaries through whom the law was given. Acts 7:53, Galatians 3:19. The law came through angels, which meant angels were associated with the highest possible spiritual authority in the Jewish world. So the author says, Jesus is not an angel. He is the Son. He sits at the right hand of the Majesty. The angels worship him. He is categorically above them. And then, chapters 3 and 4, Jesus is greater than Moses. For a Jewish audience, this is even more striking. Moses was the figure above all figures, the one who spoke with God face to face, the one through whom the law came, the one who led the Exodus. He was the central pillar of Jewish identity. To say someone is greater than Moses was not a small claim. And the author makes it directly. Moses was faithful in God's house as a servant. Jesus is faithful over God's house as the Son. The builder of a house is greater than the house itself. Moses pointed to something. Jesus is what Moses was pointing to. And then the author moves to the argument that is really the heart of the whole letter. The priesthood. Here is the situation in the Old Covenant. The people of Israel needed to approach God, but God is holy, completely and utterly set apart, of a purity that human beings in their broken state cannot simply walk into. There is a gap, and God, in His grace, built a bridge across it. The priesthood. A group of men from the family of Aaron, the tribe of Levi, set apart to serve as intermediaries, to stand between the people and God, to offer sacrifices that covered sin and maintained the relationship, to be the ones who could go where ordinary people could not. And once a year, on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the high priest would do something that no one else on earth was permitted to do. He would enter the innermost room of the temple, the Holy of Holies, the room where the presence of God dwelled above the Ark of the Covenant. He would go in, alone, once with blood, and he would make atonement for all of Israel. This was the highest moment of the entire religious year, the closest any human being ever got to the full presence of God. And then he would come back out. And the people would know, for another year, the relationship is intact, the gap is covered. But here is what the author of Hebrews wants you to see about this system. It never finished. Every year the high priest had to go back in. Every year, new blood, new sacrifice, new atonement. Because the blood of bulls and goats, however God prescribed, however necessary, could not permanently remove sin. It could cover it for now, for this year, and next year it needed covering again. The author says this directly in chapter 10, verses 1-4. The law is only a shadow of the good things that are coming, not the realities themselves. For this reason, it can never, by the same sacrifices repeated endlessly year after year, make perfect those who draw near to worship. A shadow, a picture, a placeholder, built by design, with a limitation inside it. Because it was never meant to be the final thing. It was always pointing forward to something that could actually finish the job. Now, here is where Melchizedek comes in. And I know that name sounds like it belongs in a different kind of video, but stay with me, because this is the piece that unlocks everything. Melchizedek appears exactly once in the entire Old Testament, Genesis 14. Abraham returns from battle, and this mysterious figure, king of Salem, priest of God Most High, comes out to meet him. He brings bread and wine. He blesses Abraham. Abraham gives him a tenth of everything. And then Melchizedek disappears from the narrative completely. No genealogy, no birth record, no death, no father or mother listed, no beginning of days or end of life recorded. He simply appears, blesses, and is gone. And Psalm 110, which the New Testament quotes more than any other Old Testament passage, says this about the coming king: "You are a priest forever, in the order of Melchizedek." Not in the order of Aaron, not a Levitical priest, a priest in the order of Melchizedek, a priesthood with no recorded beginning and no end, eternal, permanent, not requiring repetition or succession. The author of Hebrews says, that is Jesus. Jesus did not offer the blood of animals. He offered himself once, not to be topped up, not to be repeated. Chapter 9:26. He has appeared once for all at the culmination of the ages to do away with sin by the sacrifice of himself. Once for all. And then, this is the detail I want you to sit with. Chapter 10, verses 11 to 12. Day after day, every priest stands and performs his religious duties. Again and again he offers the same sacrifices, which can never take away sins. But when this priest had offered for all time one sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God. He sat down. Every Levitical priest who ever lived stood at his post. Because the work was never finished, there was always another sacrifice to offer, another year coming, another Yom Kippur approaching. Jesus sat down. You sit down when the work is done, not when there is more to do, not when you need a rest before continuing, when it is finished. This is what the people reading Hebrews were considering walking away from. A priest who sat down because the sacrifice was final, the gap, permanently, once for all, irreversibly, closed. Now here is where the author makes the most personally tender argument in the entire letter. He could have stopped at the priesthood argument. Jesus is a better priest, permanent sacrifice, done once, finished. That alone is a compelling case. But he goes further. Chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to feel sympathy for our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are. Yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. We do not have a high priest who is unable to feel sympathy for our weaknesses. The old high priest was a human being, which meant he had his own weaknesses, which meant before he could enter the Holy of Holies for the people, he had to offer a sacrifice for himself first. He was not above the problem. He was part of it. But Jesus is different. He knows what your life feels like from the inside. He knows hunger, exhaustion, grief, betrayal, being misunderstood by people close to him, being rejected by people he came to help, the weight of an impossible situation with no easy way through. He was tempted, the author says, in every way, just as we are. Not almost every way, not most ways, every way, and he did not give in. Which means he is not looking at your struggle with contempt. He is not sitting at the throne of grace with impatience, waiting for you to get it together before he will see you. He is a high priest who has been in the same terrain you are standing in, who knows what the ground feels like under your feet, and who has what you actually need: mercy and grace to help in your time of need. Not mercy and grace once you've improved, not mercy and grace when you've earned an audience. In your time of need, which is now, which is whatever brought you to this video today. So the author says, approach with confidence, Not crawling, not performance, not a rehearsed speech about how sorry you are. Confidence, because the one you are approaching is not cold. He knows. He has been there, and he is not going anywhere. Now the author turns from argument to direct appeal. He has built his case carefully. Jesus is greater than angels, greater than Moses, greater than the priesthood. His sacrifice is permanent, his intercession is personal. The old covenant was a shadow, and the shadow has given way to the real thing. And now, chapter 10, 35 to 36, he says this: "So do not throw away your confidence, it will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised." Do not throw away your confidence. The Greek word for throw away is apobolet, to hurl something aside, to discard it. And the author can see it happening, the grip loosening, the hands opening, the quiet, private drift toward letting go. Do not throw it away. And then, one of the most honest lines in the letter: you need to persevere. Not, this should be easy by now. Not, a mature believer would not be struggling like this. You need to persevere. Perseverance is a need, meaning this is genuinely hard, meaning holding on requires something. The author is not pretending it is easy. He is saying, I know what it costs. Hold on anyway. And then he does something brilliant. He gives them a running start for perseverance. He reaches back into their own history, the history of their people, and he builds a case from the lives of everyone who came before. Chapter 11. Chapter 11 begins with one of the most quoted definitions in the entire Bible. Verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Substance, evidence, those are legal words, forensic words. Substance in Greek is hypostasis, the title deed to a property, the legal documentation that proves ownership. Faith is the title deed to what you are hoping for. You do not possess it yet in your hands, but you hold the legal claim to it. It is yours. The paperwork exists, evidence, elenkos, a legal proof, a piece of evidence that establishes a fact in court. Faith is the proof of what you cannot yet see. The author is saying, faith is not wishful thinking, not optimism dressed in religious language. It is a legitimate legal standing, a real possession of something not yet physically received. And then, beginning in verse 4, he lists them. Every person who lived by this kind of faith, who trusted what they could not see, who kept going when it cost them, who held the title deed and never let go, even when the promise had not arrived. Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Rahab, Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, the prophets, name after name after name. And as the list builds, listen to what the author says about what some of them endured. Verses 35 through 38. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning, they were sawn in two, they were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. These people, sawn in two, wandering in deserts, living in caves, the world was not worthy of them. They looked like the evidence had not come through. They looked like faith had failed to deliver. They looked like they had lost. And the author says, you have it backwards. They were not too small for the world's standard. The world was not large enough to contain them. And then, verse 39, the pivot that makes the entire chapter clearer. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised. None of them. They lived by faith. They died in faith. They held the title deed their whole lives, and the promise had not yet arrived in full when they closed their eyes. And then, verse 40. Since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us, would they be made perfect. Every name in that list is still waiting for the same completion that these first-century believers were waiting for, the same completion you and I are waiting for. The story is not over for any of them. Abraham is in it, Moses is in it, David is in it, and so are you, and so is every person who holds on today. They stayed in the story without seeing the end. And the people reading this letter, who were about to give up and walk away, were one generation in a line that goes all the way back to Abel. To let go now, when every person in that list endured things far harder without letting go, would be to break the line, to step out of a story that has been building for thousands of years, right before the ending arrives. And then chapter 12, the most famous image in the whole letter. Verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. A great cloud of witnesses. The word witnesses here, martyron, is where we get the word martyr. And in the ancient world, a witness was not just a spectator. A witness was someone who testified, who gave evidence, who stood up in court and said, "I know this to be true. My life proves it." The cloud of witnesses is not passively watching you from the stands. They are testifying to you. Every name in chapter 11 is a piece of evidence. Abel's life says, it is worth it even when it costs you everything. Noah's life says, keep building even when everyone is laughing. Abraham's life says, go even when you do not know where you are going. The destitute, cave-dwelling, sheepskin-wearing ones say, the world's verdict on your life is not the final verdict. All of them, surrounding you, saying the same thing. We held on, so can you. And then the author gives the reader something specific to lock their eyes onto, not the witnesses, not their own willpower, not a feeling or an experience they are hoping to recapture. Verse 2. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. Pioneer, the one who goes first into territory nobody else has entered, who blazes the trail, who makes the path possible by walking it before you. Perfecter, the one who takes faith to its full completion, who finishes what faith starts, who brings to its final, full, intended purpose the thing you are holding on to right now. Jesus is not just the object of faith, he is its author, its finisher, the one who ran the race in his own person through Gethsemane, through the cross, through 3 days of silence, all the way to the resurrection, and then sat down. He sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. The race is run. The pioneer has reached the finish line. And he is not sitting there with his eyes closed. He is watching you run, knowing what it costs to run it, from the inside, knowing the weight of the long middle, having been in it himself, and he is not going anywhere. Now let me bring everything together. Hebrews is not a complicated book. It is a compassionate book. It is a letter written by someone who could see a group of people letting go of something they could not afford to let go of, and who made the most thorough, most carefully constructed, most loving case possible for why they should hold on. Here is the whole argument in one place. The old covenant was real. The prophets were real. The priesthood was real. Moses was real. The sacrifices were real. But all of it was a shadow, a picture, a placeholder, built to point forward to something, to someone, who would be the substance behind the shadow. Jesus is the substance. He is the word the prophets were pointing toward. He is the priest who sits down, because his sacrifice does not need repeating. He is the high priest who has gone into the real Holy of Holies, not with animal blood but with his own, not to come back out but to sit down. He is the pioneer of a faith that is held not on feelings or circumstances, but on the legal title deed of a promise that cannot be revoked. And going back, walking away from this, is not a sideways move. It is not a neutral option. It is trading the real thing for the picture of the real thing. It is stepping out of the sunrise and back into the painting of the sunrise. You have a priest who sat down. You have a sacrifice that is done. You have a door to the throne of grace that is permanently, irreversibly open. You have a cloud, every name from Abel to the last martyr of the first century, all of them testifying, hold on. And you have a pioneer who is already at the finish line, seated, watching you, knowing the cost of every step. Do not throw away your confidence. If you are tired, genuinely, deeply tired, of holding on, if what started as alive and real now feels like maintenance, if you are doing the motions without the feeling and quietly asking yourself how long you can keep doing this, Hebrews was written for you, specifically, by someone who saw exactly this coming. And their answer is not, generate more enthusiasm, feel more, try harder. Their answer is, look at what you actually have, not at how you feel, at what is actually, objectively, permanently true. A finished sacrifice, a seated priest, an open door, a cloud, a pioneer. Hold on. And if you are someone who has been drifting, not a dramatic exit, just a slow, quiet movement away, a little further each month, until one day you look up and the shore is barely visible. The author has a word for that too. Chapter 2, verse 1. We must pay the most careful attention, therefore, to what we have heard, so that we do not drift away. The answer to drift is not shame. It is an anchor. Hebrews 6:19. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. The hope of the gospel, the finished work, the seated priest, is an anchor, not one that removes the waves, one that holds you in them. And if you are someone watching this from outside the faith entirely, curious, skeptical, unsure what any of this is about, I want you to know that the God described in this letter is not who you might think he is. This is not a God who is hard to reach, not a God who requires you to clean up before you knock on the door. This is a God who has gone to extraordinary lengths through a priest, through a sacrifice, through a son who sat down so the door would stay open, so that any person who wants to come can come. Let us approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. That is an open invitation to anyone watching this right now. If Hebrews is a book you have never really sat with, go back to it now. Because now you know what it is doing. You know who it was written for. You know the argument. And when you know the argument, every verse lands differently. It is one of those books that rewards slow reading. If this video helped, please like it and subscribe. It genuinely puts this in front of people who are in exactly the situation Hebrews was written for. And if you know someone who is tired, who is quietly letting go, who needs to hear that the door is still open, send them this. God bless you.